Of the major city-states of the Free Marches, few have as colorful a history as Kirkwall, the City of Chains. In the ancient days of the Tevinter Imperium, its armies conquered the southern lands that would become the Free Marches, mostly inhabited by the human tribes of the Planocene peoples. The city would be founded in 620 Ancient at the very southern edge of the empire by the ambitious magister Amerius Craven and bore his name, Amerius. The land proved to be a great source of mineral wealth, and slaves carved a large, complex network of tunnels in the mines below the city, an area now known as Darktown. The jet-black stone quarried in the region was shipped back to Minrathous to raise the temples of the imperial capital, and the city also became a source of stone for the construction of the imperial highway that now stretches from the capital to southern Ferelden. After a slave rebellion in Minrathous and a failed assassination attempt on the Archon by an elven slave, the Archon decided to move the center of the imperial slave trade far away from the capital. As this would bring great wealth to whichever city was chosen, magisters began to viciously compete for it, going so far as to muster forces of mercenaries and slaves to attack one another on the frontiers, far from the Archon's sight. Allegedly, half the Imperium's slaves died in these battles. After 20 years, the city of Amerius was chosen due to the marriage of Magister Craven's son to the Archon's daughter, and so Amerius gained its moniker as the City of Chains. A fortress called the Gallows was constructed in the harbor to house and break the will of slaves that would then be put to work in the mines, quarries, and foundries, or sold to other parts of the Imperium. Executions and displays of cruelty were carried out every day, and sometimes hourly in the courtyard of the Gallows, displayed to all new slaves so they might not be tempted to anything resembling hope. All told, 1 million slaves passed through the gates of Amerius before the city fell, many coming from the frontiers of the Empire as it expanded south, or any remaining elven lands. 2 massive statues of weeping slaves, called the Twins, were built on the cliffs outside Kirkwall's harbor, containing a mechanism to raise a great harbor chain to control access between the city's harbor and the lighthouse. This being one of the few navigable paths of the narrowest portion of the Waking Sea, the rulers of Kirkwall have been able to put a stranglehold on trade and make fortunes from tolls to this day. The Craven family ascended to great political power, becoming patrons of the next 4 Archons, and being a significant force in pushing the expansion of the Imperial Highway into Ferelden, though their influence would decline as the local Alamari tribes proved very resistant to Tevinter rule. When the prophet Andraste crossed the Waking Sea with her horde of Alamari in 180 Ancient, Amerius was the only city of the south to successfully resist them. Slave uprisings occurred in the city, and 3 magisters led legions to put them down, though they mysteriously vanished before reaching the city, and the revolts were quelled without them. Even as the borders of the Imperium receded and a chaotic age of petty wars embroiled the southern lands, Amerius remained a southern outpost of imperial power for over 150 years. When the city finally fell, it would be from within, at the hands of the slaves themselves. In 25 Ancient, a popular Alamari slave named Radun was quietly poisoned by the magisters. He had gained great influence among the slaves, pushing the magisters for better conditions. The magisters did not execute him openly, fearing a violent reaction from the slaves, but that came anyway after his death. The slaves rose up and sacked Hightown, killing the magisters. The last Tevinter outpost in the south had finally fallen. Amerius was renamed Kirkwall, named for the black walls of the cliffs that guard the city harbor. When the Chantry faith swept through the Free Marches on the heels of Cordelis Draken's armies during the Second Blight, Kirkwall was no exception. A Grand Cleric was ultimately appointed to the city, and the slave quarters of the gallows were repurposed to house the city's circle of magi and a garrison of Templars. The city was not directly threatened during the Third Blight, but would not be so fortunate during the Fourth. In 521 Exalted, the city of Kirkwall was temporarily evacuated by the Grey Wardens before the Darkspawn could attack, removing the population to Fortress Hain in the Vimark Mountains. They were able to repopulate when the Blight ended a few years later. While the wars with the Qunari raged during the Storm Age, the Qunari landed a force near the Marcher city of Ostwick in 756 Storm, with the goal of capturing the cities of Kirkwall and Starkhaven. They hoped to prevent Orlais from sending supplies to the forces already fighting the Qunari in Brevane. With Starkhaven, they could block the most direct northern roads. With Kirkwall, they could use the port to block Orlesian ships in the Waking Sea. The Qunari captured the city in a night raid, using their chained mages the Cerebas to tear a section of the city wall down. For the next 4 years, the Qunari ruled the city and forced conversion on the populace, tearing children from their families and putting people into brutal labor camps. The Orlesian chevalier, Michael Lafayette, liberated the city from the Qunari. Of the people he encountered when he rode through the city, he wrote, "Kirkwall is full of people with empty eyes that have had all independent thought driven from them." The Orlesian Emperor appointed Lafayette as Viscount of the city in 760 Storm, and he set about undoing the Qunari's religious indoctrination. He also established the city guard that still guards the city to this day, in part to offset the martial power of the city's sizable Templar garrison, which had previously been the primary source of order in the city. The Kirkwallers would throw off Orlesian rule in 8-5 Blessed, but the popularity of the Lafayette bloodline was such that the title of Viscount for the city's ruler was retained. A number of families would hold the title through the years. A man named Chivalry Threnhold took power in the city through a campaign of intimidation at the start of the Dragon Age, and earned a reputation as a vicious thug. When his son Perrin succeeded him in 914 Dragon, he proved that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Viscount Perrin Threnhold used the city's Great Chain to strangle Orlesian shipping and extract exorbitant fees in 920 Dragon. The Orlesian Emperor Florian threatened invasion, and asked his personal friend Divine Beatrix III to use the Templar garrison in the city to pressure the Viscount. The garrison's leader, Knight Commander Gylian, refused to interfere in political matters, but Perrin viewed them as a threat nonetheless. The Viscount hired an army of mercenaries and stormed the gallows in 921 Dragon, hanging the Knight Commander and igniting a series of battles with the Order. Ultimately, the Templars, led by Knight Captain Meredith Stannard, marched on the Viscount's keep in retaliation and intimidated the city guard into turning on the Viscount. Perrin was thrown into his own dungeon and stripped of his office. Meredith was promoted by Grand Cleric Elthina to be the new Knight Commander, and at her strong urging, the nobility selected Marlowe Dumar as the next Viscount. At his coronation, Meredith presented him with an ivory box with "His fate need not be yours" written on the lid. Inside was Threnhold's broken and bloody signet ring. Dumar was unwilling to defy the Templars for the entirety of his reign. In 930 Dragon, Kirkwall and other southern Marcher cities played host to a flood of refugees from Ferelden as the Fifth Blight ravaged their country. For Kirkwall, this would be quickly followed by the unwelcome return of the Qunari to their shores. A small army of Qunari were shipwrecked on the coast near Kirkwall in 931 Dragon, led by the Arishok himself, the highest military leader of the Qunari. Hoping to avoid any conflict, the Viscount granted the Qunari a compound by the Kirkwall docks, where they might wait for a ship to take them home. The Arishok accepted, but no ship ever came. For 3 years, tensions escalated between the Qunari and the Kirkwallers, with extreme elements of the Chantry actively seeking to rouse the populace against the Qunari. The matter would reach a head in 934 Dragon, when the Qunari accepted the conversion of 2 elven criminals that had murdered a corrupt guardsman for raping their sister. The rape was news to the guard captain, Aveline Valen, who nonetheless wanted to take the elves into custody pending investigation to avert a riot against the Qunari. The Arishok, however, had lost patience. His true mission all this time was to recover a tome written by the founder of the Qunari philosophy, and now he would rather sift through the ashes for it than continue to tolerate the corruption and fanatics of Kirkwall. The Arishok's forces stormed the city, catching the city guard and Templars flat-footed. He quickly took the Viscount's keep and captured the nobility. Viscount Dumar was executed. A Ferelden refugee turned noble named Hawk joined forces with Templar Knight Commander Meredith and First Enchanter Orsino of Kirkwall Circle of Magi to retake the Viscount's keep. Hawk was ultimately able to free Kirkwall from a potential second Qunari occupation. Hawk was declared Champion of Kirkwall for saving the city. For the next 3 years, however, it was Knight Commander Meredith that held the reins of power in Kirkwall. Having the largest force in the city, she once again stood in a position to act as kingmaker in the city, but she blocked the nobility from electing a new Viscount. She had also become increasingly paranoid about the presence of blood mages and other subversive magic. At some point, Meredith had come into possession of an idol retrieved from the Deep Roads a few years prior, made of red lyrium. Red lyrium is now known to induce madness and fear in those that spend too much time around it, and Meredith kept it around her constantly. She had it fashioned into a sword she carried with her. As she spiraled into paranoia and saw blood mage conspiracies in every shadow, her treatment of mages in her order's care, which had never been particularly kind to start with, became more and more brutal. Meredith clashed with First Enchanter Orsino, though Grand Cleric Elthina managed to keep some sort of peace between the two. Eventually, something had to give. That something was a possessed apostate named Anders. Anders was an ally of the Mage Underground, a network that sought to help mages and sometimes smuggle them out of the gallows to freedom. Meredith's crackdown on the mages destroyed that network, and Anders had become increasingly influenced by the uncompromising spirit of justice he had allowed to possess him, transformed more into a spirit of vengeance now by his anger and discontent. Anders decided to force a confrontation by removing the possibility of compromise. He caused an explosion that destroyed Kirkwall's Chantry in 937 Dragon and killed Grand Cleric Elthina. Meredith flew into a rage. Declaring that the people of Kirkwall would demand the blood of mages, she invoked the right of annulment, giving herself a mandate to summarily execute every mage in Kirkwall's Circle of Magi. What followed was chaos, as battles between mages and Templars broke out in the streets. Desperate cornered mages tore open the veil, summoning demons and allowing themselves to be possessed. Eventually, the Templars would move to confront the mages at the gallows, where a despairing First Enchanter Orsino resorted to a blood magic ritual to create a harvester from his own flesh and that of the dead mages. The champion, thankfully, destroyed the creature in short order and confronted Meredith, who ordered that the champion be killed. Her Templars questioned her orders, and that was when Meredith's madness reached its apex, accusing her own Templars of being blood mage thralls. She drew upon the power of her red lyrium sword and wielded bizarre powers, bringing statues to life to fight her enemies. Ultimately, the champion was able to put down the Mad Templar. The events of that day would reverberate throughout Thedas, stoking unrest among the other circles, but Kirkwall would be left to nurse its wounds. The city spent years rebuilding from that day, still struggling to elect and keep a Viscount, but by 944 Dragon they had settled on a new Viscount, a dwarf named Varric Tethras. As a native of the city and head of a dwarven merchants guild family, Varric had contributed greatly to the reconstruction and was rewarded with a job nobody else really wanted. It should be said that there may be a reason behind Kirkwall's tumultuous history and its bloody reputation. Curiously, the Tevinter seemingly only discovered the mineral wealth of the area after the city was founded, leading to speculation that the Magister's initial purpose in Amerius was not all as it seemed. The region does have certain historical and magical significance. The city lies near the mountain of Sundermount, said to be the site of a climactic battle between the ancient Elven civilization and the Tevinter Imperium centuries previous. The magic and violence of that battle sundered the Veil, making it easier for spirits and demons to slip through to our world, weakening the Veil in the entire region to this day. Further, investigations conducted by the Chantry's Seekers of Truth have uncovered sinister intentions within the very foundations of the city. The outlines and patterns of Kirkwall's intersections, back alleys, and boulevards bear a striking resemblance to those found on magical glyphs. Many of the city's books and scrolls were burned when the slaves rose up, but some hint of the Magister's plans have survived. Within the twisted labyrinth of tunnels beneath the city, caches of magical research materials and blood-stained ritual chambers are still being found, undisturbed since the days of ancient Tevinter. Hundreds of mages were once cloistered there by the Magisters, engaging in research even Tevinter felt should be hidden. Each time one of these vaults is uncovered, a flood of ancient books and artifacts appear in the city's black market. Ancient administrative records reveal discrepancies. For every 1,000 slaves that entered the city, 100 mysteriously went unaccounted for. An entire civilization's worth of slaves simply vanished over the centuries, their blood spilled in sacrifice beneath the streets of the city again and again. The Magisters were deliberately thinning the Veil. This thinning of the Veil has affected Kirkwall for its entire history. Higher rates of lunacy, violence, and maleficar have plagued the city for centuries. In the Circle, mages die during their harrowing more often and turn to blood magic at rates double that of other Marcher cities. Demon cults and blood mage groups also have a history of taking up residence in the city and preying on the innocent. Some speculate that the city's proximity to the Vimark Mountains, which we now know was the location of a Grey Warden prison for the ancient tainted Magister Corypheus, may have contributed to the tendency for violence and madness in the region, but that remains unconfirmed. Despite all the troubles that have plagued the City of Chains, the Kirkwallers persist. The city-state of Kirkwall is one of the most unique places in Thedas, with a blood-stained but resilient history. If you're an adventurous sort and you find yourself in Kirkwall, go to Lowtown and visit the Hanged Man, the seediest bar in town. Keep your ear to the ground, and sooner or later you may find yourself wrapped up in the next chapter of Kirkwall's history. I think that's everything I can think to get across about the history of Kirkwall. I hope you guys appreciate it. We don't know enough about many Marcher cities to have a distinct video about each of them, but there's definitely plenty to say about Kirkwall. I have basically spoiled Dragon Age 2 entirely here, but given that the game is over 10 years old, I think I can be forgiven. I hope you all have a great day.